Ladies and gentlemen, the last thing written by Yasuko Kobayashi I can say to have enjoyed. But as usual, since this is the only thing I'm doing that's Garo related this year, let's give the annual updates on the franchise. Kraken has continued to do a fantastic job in importing the main live-action series, completing not only the original chapter of The Black Wolf, but also released most of its OVAs and movies for mostly fair price points for the content. Though I can now finally voice a bit of criticism at the sets in that with the release of Garo's second series Makai Senki, they initially made an error in promotional material for the set and mislabeled it Makai Senkyu. But later on, they actually managed to correct their own error and returned it to being Makai Senki as it should be. After all, that series is ultimately tied deeply into the plights of the successors to the armor of the Senko Kishi, or Flash Knight. Senko Kishi capable of being shortened down to Senki, thus the reason for the subtitle of the series. And is it again an example of why I do not give Shout Factory any slack for the now innumerable screw-ups in their Super Sentai DVD sets. As here's a company doing the exact same type of release for a Toku series as Shout Factory, and yet they are more than capable of fixing anything that might have been screwed up before their product actually releases. Garo Kami no Kiba hit theaters and reunited the cast of Yamaura Torasumono and Goldstorm Show for one big massive brawl, in the Raiga era of the franchise. And the popularity of it has ultimately led to Masahiro Inoue getting his own spin-off series focused on his character of Jinga, which started airing more recently. Though sadly, this seems to have once more pushed back the development for a sequel movie event for Raiga Saejima and the cast from Makai no Hana, which we will get to next year. Well, I hope to. 2019 is going to be a busy year. Still, really annoyed Raiga has not yet gotten a sequel series for his story yet, since practically every other Garo bearer has at this point. Garo, Vanishing Line aired, and while Funimation's many localization problems have continued, it was yet another meh entry where when it was good it was alright, and when it was bad it exemplified the ongoing problems with the anime series where they regularly seem to be more style than substance, and can't seem to bring the same awe and merit that the live-action shows do. Despite Vanishing Line, once again, being an improvement over what's come before. With again, in my opinion, Hono no Kokuin I have the most complaints about. Really, I'm considering not even talking about the anime since it's in primary circulation, despite Funimation's dub changes, and it's rare I talk about anime series in the first place. Though a rumor circulated earlier this year that members of Vanishing Line's production team went on a Japanese podcast and said none of the Garo anime are in continuity with the live-action Garo series. Supposedly they share common elements such as the armors, the night order, and the modus operandi of the horrors, but if this is true, aren't meant to relate in the aspect that their events and how things are depicted are not consistent with the previously established setting, rules, and history of the world provided by the main series lore, despite how obviously they were meant to. And the stories of Koga, Raiga, and Ryuga, despite the anime calling upon lore introduced in those entries, didn't happen there. Unfortunately, the site who reported this, Hero Shock, has a terrible track record with citing its sources and mistakenly reporting rumors and fan theories as fact, leading to much skepticism. Not helped in the language used in their statement, nor how the purported interview's host, the Japanese video site Nico Nico Doga, has proved to be a crapshoot in trying to find it. As far as I'm aware, no one has, and the only ones who reported on this whole thing linked back to the Hero Shock article, and trying to contact them directly about it has led to no replies, making this whole thing unsubstantiated at best and clickbait rumor-mongering at worst. Disappointing, as despite my words last year about Garo continuity, I don't really have stake on whether the franchise is in separate continuities or not. I still feel my reasoning from last year is valid, as it is always better to build a bigger and better story by everything being connected, but unlike the other big Tokusatsu producers who used to make big deals over continuity and keeping your story straight due to all the ones that failed at it, thus it is a bigger issue when they continue to fail at it, Garo has not made a fuss about that, and has been more about lore consistency and internal continuity, thus making the interest in this mostly about settling a fandom debate and two competing theories on how Garo's continuity works, as both have the evidence to make a case. Though Kami no Kiba has admittedly given more evidence to the they are all in one long canon theory. But without frustrating a time I've had in trying to get verified information on this franchise, I'm just professionally annoyed they refuse to cite their source as pretty much every other Tokusatsu news site does. Though really, it's why I'm on the fence about even talking about the anime in the first place, as I've soured to them so. Why should I give a damn about something that doesn't even bother to keep itself consistent with any of the other material, and only seems to care about style over substance? With that, let's actually get started on Zero Black Blood. This is the first entry in the Koga era of content that put another Makai Knight in the driver's seat. Done because Rei Suzumura, played by our old pal Rei Fujita, was a breakout character in the original Garo series that sadly didn't get his time to shine in the later sequel movies that led to the franchise gaining its second wind. He had far more of a spotlight as I showed in Makai Senki, thus with Ryosei Konishi stepping down as franchise lead. More recently I learned this to have been because of an illness Ryosei Konishi contracted, which he needed to seek treatment for. Well, it makes sense that to still tell stories with characters in that period, it would make sense to pivot to make another Makai Knight of that era the star. Which has thus resulted in this 6-episode miniseries, and 2017's rather frustrating 13-episode series, Zero Dragon Blood. Still, this was not a bad idea at all, as... hell, this was the entry that was my first dive into the Garo material, and alongside Makai no Hana, made me go back and watch the rest. Though, for the purposes of this review, I've decided to make use of the theatrical cut of the 6-episode miniseries, divided into two 70-minute films called White and Black Chapter. We open out in Rei's district, a blood-covered man running from his pursuers. His play intercut with scenes from Bar Lupo, patroned by Rei Suzumura and a bunch of other customers. Hi, Iorikasa! Before the bar's horror detectors tip them off to what's going down with him. Tom Cruise called, he wants his shtick back. This transitions to the opening theme, which is of course done by the ever awesome Jan Project, and what I feel to be one of the best songs they've ever done. While it's simple and to the point, the guitar riffs here are exquisite. Though oddly all of the credits, for once in this material, are all in English. I don't know why they decided to do that, but it did feel strange for a Japanese work for once to have credits listed in English, without a single instance of English popping up. Will probably make it easier for Kraken once they get to it. If they get to it. I hope they do. The man covered in slime collapses, however, his horror hunters finally claiming him. It revealed that the slime is in fact a result of the horrors priming his body, so it ripens into the best state for them to eat him. Yeah, more a sign of Kobayashi's unfamiliarity with the series, since the horrors can pretty much take whatever form they choose. This event, however, only makes use of the base suits, and the horrors themselves are not creative or imaginative in the slightest. The movie treats them as little more than Sentai-style monsters of the week instead of a plague of extra-dimensional eldritch creatures. Once more, a sign of Kobayashi being, well, one-dimensional with creature features, as she keeps writing them as being human instead of a metaphorically alien species. It's kind of a significant aspect of this film in that, while it does make for an appealing narrative, makes it clear she really didn't understand how horrors worked, as it wasn't like the Gadoshu from Shinkenger. They reveal that the guy has been dosed with dulse, which, while not exactly explained, is what happens when a human willingly ingests a compound made of horror blood. Now, I could critique this too in how we saw what horror blood does to someone in the first episodes of the franchise. It slowly poisons someone affected by it until it kills them, and the stain of it on them makes them smell delicious to horrors, which is in contrast to what we see happening to this victim. However, I always took the interpretation that it has to do with the difference in means by which they're poisoned. Kaoru, in Garo Chapter of the Black Wolf, was poisoned by skin contact, versus this being them ingesting it. The former corrupting someone externally with it then consuming everything from within, while here the dulse is infecting them inside out, which makes them delectable far faster. This, however, does not work, because Rei gets some horror blood on him in this fight, though it's in human form, and nothing comes of it. But still, it's time. Equip! I never get tired of seeing that. And I spent 300 hours playing Final Fantasy XIV where at least a third of it was equipped with that armor. However, as they fight, another interloper intercedes, appearing amidst white feathers. Steve Bills, what are you doing here? This is Ring, played by the ever-awesome Thane Camus, an American actor who set himself up in Japan, and has since 2005 run his own talent agency for actors of foreign nationality or descent who've looked to get acting work in Japan, with this role being one of his personal big breaks. Well, technically his big break was in one of the Crayon Shin-chan movies. I'm not kidding on that, but I'm more baffled why that series still exists. His most recent work, though, has been Kamen Rider Ghost, which sadly sucked, though his part in it wasn't terrible, and Xanthus in the Valkyria Chronicles franchise, which, as an RPG, is on my list. I'm kinda surprised he hasn't been in more stuff, though, as he's a really good actor, and projects instant charisma into his roles, partly because he actually knows how to make use of body language and emoting. He overwhelms Rei with his abuse of feathers, before broaching his victim, and, with words, brings him back into the fold, confusing pretty much everyone. No, we really won't. For several reasons. We're reminded of the effects of horror blood, Rei musing that even if he was fated to death, that it would have been better for him to die with dignity than to be eaten. Yeah, no. Now that I've seen everything involving Rei, that was not ever actually a thing with him. Or if it was, it died with Shizuka. This is kind of a bigger problem with this entry, and it's primarily because of Kobayashi being the writer. Rei is an entirely established character from his previous deuteragonist status, and yet with exception to his love for sweets, this film puts him under a complete personality reset to conform to Kobayashi's usual modus operandi, and then shoves him into the backseat of events despite him being the title character. Though we don't see that right away. First we have him attacked by a train dork. Huh. I guess the Shadowline paid better. And yeah, while Russia Sentai Tokucha had started airing a few weeks before these films premiered, by production schedule, Zero Black Blood actually was produced first, with actress Riria, who played Tokusango Miyonatsume in Tokucha, being recommended for the Sentai role because of this work. That she ended up in an unpopular series, though, yeah, that's bad luck when you get your in through a contentious writer. Here, though, she is playing Yuna, and in Training Knight. Well, they can wield Makai blades, but the problem is there are no Makai Knight armors made for women to be wielded, thus her training with a sword isn't strange, but just uncommon. And hell, this is an odd reaction for Rei to have to a woman wielding a soul blade weapon as, well, he has met Rekka on multiple occasions. And Rekka has been known to wield a soul metal dagger alongside her Mado brush, primarily because the dagger better fits her agile and aggressive fighting style. Though that tidbit is important as that soul metal dagger has the same properties in it as a standard Makai sword, bar its connection to summoning a specific armor. Meaning if she can use that dagger without problem, then there is absolutely no reason to think that women are actually incapable of sword wielding in the franchise even if they can't don an armor. Hell, historically, sword priests have not been an unknown discipline. The fight, however, which shows Yuna has an odd mark on her hand, is interrupted by Yuna's teacher Kain, who breaks it up by him being stupid. And Yuna's reason for attacking? And what was preventing you from introducing yourself first? You attacked him while he was in bed. It is in fact a rare warrior who has the skill and fidelity to be on guard while at rest. Hell, old military tactic was to kill enemies while they were asleep, because even the most skilled are susceptible then. That was in fact the entire point behind a running gag being present in Japanese media dating back to Ranma 1/2 or even before it. Attacking someone while sleeping, and them being that ridiculous a battlemaster to avoid it, is supposed to be subversive comedy. Thus, if Rei was normal, at least Makai Knight normal, he would have been caught by that, and you'd have killed someone you're coming to for help. And how do you even get into his apartment in the first place? Hell, this makes even less sense with Yuna's motivations. She wants to be seen as an asset in this specific case, as she has a personal vendetta against this horror later in the film. Thus, being seen as a reckless fighter would only detract from perception that she could be useful, or that Rei would possibly be unneeded in this manner. It would make more sense had they met, Yuna been indignant and taunting Rei to a spar, their skill then gets shown, and Yuna concedes after she sees she's outmatched or by that Mark acting up. Thus there being earned mutual respect instead of their working relationship starting out antagonistic, as the job that needs doing here is something she absolutely wants more than anything to be done, that starting something petty with another knight would sabotage in its entirety. And keep in mind, this is the last thing by Kobayashi I found good, where it didn't sabotage itself irreparably. We're not even a few minutes into this, and she's already shooting herself in the foot with the same foolishness that damaged other series, where she could have more than justified what she wanted to do. Her inter-character conflicts can be more pointless than in New Ways, because at least when it comes to Toshiki and New, the bullshit always comes across from personalities being the cause of the conflict, even if it undermines their own agenda, not the conflict itself being at odds with the personality and agenda of the one instigating the conflict. Again, you are made of stupid with how you've done this. Kain gives the orders from the watchdogs. They're working together to stop Ring, explaining he's a dangerous horror because he's been out for a while, but in contradiction to most horrors, Ring has started to actually think about what he's doing. As I've discussed before, standard horrors are little more than beasts, hunters, seeking a means to sate an endless hunger, and their crazy supernatural stuff just the off-the-wall means of making the fly walk into the spider's web, so to speak. They don't come up with crazy meticulous plans or schemes because it needlessly complicates a simple desire to eat. They are predators. And while it's a simplistic interpretation, it is an accurate one, and why most of the actual main antagonists of the series have been humans or humans corrupted by the powers of the horrors. The closest outside of Ring we've gotten in the live-action shows, of course, being Jinga. But even there, his plan is pretty simple. He's just a bit more methodical and nuanced in what he cares about, and how he goes about performing his plots. Though it leads to its credit, Ring is stated to be an abnormal horror, his goal being to make humans and horrors coexist, which, by their very nature, is impossible. The horror's hunger is insatiable, eating only making it go dormant for so long. Without outside factors affecting things, there is no way to suppress that instinct. And the longer horrors go unslain, the more their number will build up endlessly, until there are too many predators, not enough prey. Thus, by everything the franchise has presented, what he seems to be doing is in principle an impossibility. Not because of fate, but by their very fundamental nature of being born as manifestations of all the world's evils. As long as a horror is incapable of suppressing that urge to feed without any outside influence, no thought of coexistence will ever be more than fleeting. How Ring's gone about this is, in his little plant community, he set up several factors which facilitate peace among its inhabitants. First, the human inhabitants are all criminals or those escaping thought for their own malicious or malevolent actions. Recruited by Ring because, well, their life was over already due to what they've done, and horrors can sense corrupt souls from miles away, so would already be up for the death penalty and easily to find and trick into it. This all shown with the next inductee to Ring's plant community named Kato, who checks his phone while driving, and thus ends up committing a hit-and-run homicide totally on accident. While he shows great shock and regret for his actions, he's more concerned about himself and what this mistake will cost him, thinking his life's now over because, well, vehicular homicide is a guaranteed prison sentence. So in his despair and wish to escape a devastated life, Ring is the angel of mercy offering just that, but with conditions behind it. Not realizing that no one would trust the devil if he didn't come to them bathed in white. Always beware the white mage.
数ヶ月に一度礎に選ばれ命を落とす可能性がある。選ばれるのは50人に1人。これからもっと確率は下がるでしょう。礎もう一人ですか？だって一昨日出したばっかりじゃないですか。これからは好きに2人でないと。
And of course, the devil lies. Thus, the residents are all effectively in one long waiting line for the death penalty that is being devoured by a horror. However, they are deceived into the idea of being free by the capsules of horror blood being given out as part of a random lottery. Thus, when feeding time comes around, they're oblivious to their death sentence until it's too late, and deceived by Ring's false hope that they can continue living in this paradise, even though the odds they would be eaten are higher than any other person. And for what is showcasing about these people, had they chosen to own up to what they did, they could have repented and picked up the pieces when everything was over. In a way, the human part of this community are paying the consequences of their moral cowardice, avoiding the responsibility for their actions, and thus have found themselves in purgatory awaiting certain death, the ultimate punishment for running away from what they should have done. Kinda surprising Takamasa Suga isn't here. Shinji Kito would so fit in with how much he avoided actually doing his duty. Instead, we have Miyuki Tezuka's actor to die in Garo again. No, really, Kamen Rider keeps showing up in the Garo franchise solely to be killed off. It is strange. The horror side, however, is, as I said, having their desire to eat as much as they want suppressed by the music of Makai priest Iu, Yuna's mother, whose healing melody that was originally intended to strengthen the Makai Knight, her partner, Yuna's dead father Kurodo, has entranced Ring, and has even allowed him the mental clarity to even think of this plan up in the first place. Thinking the peace and tranquility he's personally found can be applied to all horrors, but it simply exchanged one desire for another, instead of allowing him to do it independently. If Iu doesn't sing often enough, the horror's desire will cause them to eat everything in sight. There simply is not enough humans out there who would commit crimes that he can get to con them into this, so it's simply a fleeting dream from the start, which Ring can't see simply because he's drunk on Iu's song. He doesn't realize he is just as guilty as the other horrors and the humans he constantly calls rotten and corrupt, simply for the sin of existing. After all, horrors are a reflection of an aspect of man, so if they were born from them and they are malevolence personified, doesn't that make humans just as bad? The flaw in this, of course, being that he only exposes himself to the worst of humanity who only think of themselves. But in essence, this is what more makes this series work despite its flaws. Ring is endeavoring to reach beyond his malicious nature and be something better, but from a flawed perspective, which, combined with Dane Camus's charisma, totally sells his dedication to this, even if it can never be. Granted, even that is heavily flawed, in that Iu, despite this man having imprisoned her, stolen her sight, and murdered her husband, is completely complicit in Ring's plan without any type of mental domination of hypnosis inflicted upon her. Yeah, she's doing all this entirely of her own free will. The only reason this has come about is her song keeps him calm so he doesn't rampage, and also is responsible for the priest's barrier seals which have kept Ring's planned community locations hidden, as Ring doesn't have that capability himself. Thus, were she not doing that, Ring would have been found out and slain at this point without endangering anyone else like this, as it is the Makai Order's duty to cut down horrors to protect everything they stand for. It's not their job in any respect to judge humans, but to let them come to harm is against everything they stand for. And again, she's not a corrupt priest. She has no reason to give Ring everything he wants like this, and yet, why is she doing so? Yeah, no reason given. She's solely there to facilitate Yuna's part in this revenge plot, and the excuse the series needs for why Ring isn't acting like a normal horror. She's there to serve as a plot device. Granted, I have seen stories where that works, the expected .hack GU reference from me being slotted right here, but that only works if such a character is a cipher for something bigger and more important than the character's existence can provide. She's only important to the story in what she facilitates, but otherwise in the active parts of the story is less than a tale or scene accessory, and doesn't resemble an actual person. Really, Iu's part in all this is the weakest part of the story, as despite being a root cause behind this entire situation, it would seem as if she should be an important piece to the narrative, she plays no role and has no impact on anything that happens. You could have written her as having been a special soul that when Ring ate it allowed him his greater sapiency, and thus wanting to see other horrors evolve into that like he has, and shared Iu's power with them as an expression to calm them enough to, well, think, or use the soul to power a horror artifact that gives them this special composed and calm state as a potential counter in olden times of the knights overthrowing their rule. And that would have worked just as well. And here's where we get to the stupid part again. See, the film keeps asserting that no one but men can pick up the soul metal weapons the knights use. The reason why Yuna can use her father's sword is because Kain fused into her arm one of her dead father's bones with a magic spell, tricking the sword into recognizing her as its wielder, with the side effect being that every so often her arm flares up with seals, as her body and the sword both reject her because she's actually a woman, and women here cannot wield Makai blades. When that is not at all how the swords work. They are made of soul metal. Soul metal judges the weight of one's soul. Those who act with clarity are capable of picking up and wielding them as if they were weightless. We have seen this within the series numerous times. It is not that women cannot wield blades, and that is the standard which no one defies that this miniseries keeps asserting, as we've constantly seen that's bullshit, again with the pinnacle example being Rekka, who Rei has met. But they normally do not, as no Makai armor was made that was meant to be worn by a woman due to, at the time, there being few with the level of martial training required of them, and males being overall physically stronger, and thus more able to endure the rigors of the armors, and relatedly the risks of its corruption, were the wielder to become a lost soul beast. Thus, most of the soul metal blades that exist aren't wielded by women, because they are paired with the armors. And a woman possessing the related sword means that armor isn't in circulation for someone to serve as a Makai knight. And the scarcity of the knight armors thus means that Yuna using her father's sword all throughout this series means she is, in fact, through her own selfishness, preventing someone else from getting an armor which can be used to save more people. They could be done in comparison to that a single priest without such a capability to equip an armor can do with it. But again, it is not in any way that they can't, and thus need to cheat around it. They can wield a sword just fine, without rejection by the sword, or any required augmentation, as Yuna is explained as possessing enough training and talent as a Makai priest to be able to pick up soul metal weapons without problem, as she, like everyone else in the Order, has been trained since childhood to make use of such artifacts. But apparently someone writing this paid no attention to the actual freaking lore of the show to know this. Thus, this entire story point around Yuna being left in pain by the bone shoved in her arm so she can even use it is entirely asinine. As, in a way, it does validate Rei's many reservations of even working with them, as if he can't trust them to pull their weight. Which again, from a meta perspective, can be seen as his own way of acknowledging that these two don't know the first thing about what they're even talking about. Because they actually don't. Still, Ring comes to recruit Kato into his gilded cage, even offering to let his fiancée in with him on the condition she's possessed by a horror, only for Rei to intercede.
Makai Kishi, you always seem to come just in time.
I seriously love this dude.